Hi, everyone. As people are coming in, I think we can get started. And hopefully more people will just stream in. My name is Helen Leung, and I'm the chair of SFU's Department of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies. I'm also the convener of this year's President's Dream Colloquium, and I would like to welcome you all to our first public event, a conversation with Afua Cooper in celebration of Black History Month. Now, before we start the event, I would like to first acknowledge that I am privileged to be connecting in from my home downtown, which is on the unceded traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And it's my honor to invite Elder Margaret George from the Swahalok First Nation to share a few words with us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to come and join with us during this time. And welcome to the territory of the First Nations people, the Musqueam, Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and Colloquium. Just a quick prayer for you. Great Spirit, thank you for bringing us together today. Just guide each and every one of us on the path that we're on. Thanking our communities for allowing us to do the work that we do, and our families for the time that we're not with them. I ask Great Spirit just to clear our paths, give us strength, and give us courage. I ask Great Spirit also to bless the little ones who are witnessing what we are doing, and just keep our families safe, all my relations.
I'm very grateful to Elder Margaret for her blessing. This year's President Dream Colloquium on From Conversations to Action, Creating from Social Justice Research is made possible by several partners. First, by generous funding from SFU President's Office and the support and collaboration of the Office of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies, SFU Public Square, and the Department of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies, which is celebrating 50 years of teaching social justice issues at SFU. For this year's colloquium, we're really happy to be able to invite back 4 scholars who previously held the Ruth Wynn Woodward Endowed Chair in Women's Studies, which was the first ever endowed chair to be established at SFU. On this great occasion, it is my pleasure to invite our president, Dr. Joy Johnson, to say a few words about the colloquium.
Thank you ever so much, Helen, for your introduction. And just want to also thank Elder Margaret. It's such a pleasure to see Elder Margaret providing a land acknowledgement. And I too want to acknowledge that I'm privileged to be joining all of you today from downtown Vancouver on the beautiful unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam peoples. It's just part of our reconciliation that we need to acknowledge how privileged we are to be able to work, play, and live on these lands. I'm delighted to be here for the launch of the Spring 2021 President's Dream Colloquium. This really is a dream for me to see these scholars coming together on the topic of From Conversations to Action, Creating from Social Justice Research. I want to welcome all of you for joining us today. It's great to see so many of you here with us and engaging in what I think is going to be an absolutely amazing conversation. This is the first time that the Colloquium program has been delivered virtually. Usually we come together in person and have a chance to chat and get to know each other. But I'm so glad that we are able to move forward with this Colloquium. The SFU's Dream Colloquium was launched in 2012 to create a forum for interdisciplinary engagement amongst SFU students, faculty, and staff, as well as the broader communities that we serve on themes of interest across the university. And I see that we do have people from across the university joining us today, as well as a number of our community partners. So this is really a wonderful opportunity for us to connect. The Colloquium includes a combination of public events and student seminars. And this series is a bit different than those in the past in that we're excited to be presenting a more interactive, conversational format. I think now more than ever, we need to be talking about these critical issues. Students are going to be learning from leading social justice advocates, how they have made an impact and they're going to help them develop their own creative ways to move from conversation to action. This semester, 18 students, at least that's the number I've received, from diverse disciplines, including gender, sexuality, and women's studies, resource and environmental management, contemporary arts and education, urban studies, are enrolled for credit in the colloquium. And if I've missed your discipline, please let me know in the chat. I'm really thinking it's a wonderful opportunity for them to learn not only from faculty members and guest speakers, but also from each other. By promoting interdisciplinary evidence-based dialogue on important topics, this colloquium reflects SFU's vision to be Canada's engaged university, while providing rewarding, inspiring, and interdisciplinary student experiences. We're delighted to present today's conversation in celebration of Black History Month. I've also recently heard it referred to as Black Futures Month, and I think that's also something that we're going to be thinking about today. Today's very special guest, Dr. Afua Cooper, is an authority on African Canadian studies and on the history of Black people in Canada. And I'm so excited to hear from her. I've got my paper and pencil ready to take some notes, and we're so glad she could join us today. This colloquium series also celebrates the 50th anniversary of the Department of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies at SFU. Just imagine 50 years ago starting this amazing department. It's been 50 years since Simon Fraser University offered the first course in women's studies, and that course was titled The Geography of Gender. We stand on the shoulders of many scholars who have built GSWS into what it is today, a groundbreaking, cutting edge, and interdisciplinary department. I want to just congratulate the department on this milestone. I'd like to thank the faculty and staff members who've conceived of this colloquium and have worked so hard to make it possible. I just want to mention some of the partners. Helen's already mentioned some of them: graduate and postdoctoral studies, the Department of Gender and Sexuality and Women's Studies, SFU Public Square, the Office of the President, my staff also helping behind the scenes. I want to acknowledge them. And thanks also to Stevie Benish and Stacy Makratoff from the Graduate Studies Office, as well as the Dean and Associate Provost, Jeff Dirksen, and Associate Dean Roxanne Panchazzi. They've all helped so much on this 14th President's Dream Colloquium. So you're going to have an opportunity to share your ideas and questions during the conversations, and I really encourage all of you to do so. So with that, I'm going to pass the floor back to Helen. Just so great to see so many of you here. Back to you, Helen.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson, for your wonderful remarks and encouragement. Now, before I have my pleasurable task of introducing Professor Cooper, I would like to first give you a brief rundown of how our event's going to proceed today and also remind you of our community guidelines. We will begin with Professor Cooper's presentation, and after which you can submit your questions using the Q&A function in the bottom. Our moderator, Thomas Gerard, who you will meet later, will also remind you of the details at the start of the Q&A session. Now, those of you who need closed captioning, it is available if you click on the CC button at the bottom. You are also welcome to use the chat function throughout the event, but please observe our community guidelines, which is going to be posted, and please be respectful citizens. Now, finally, the exciting part, there will be a draw for prizes that are generously provided by SFU Alumni Office before we finish. So do stay to the very end to see if any of you get lucky. So it is now my great pleasure to welcome Professor Afua Cooper back to SFU, where she held the Ruth Woodward Endowed Chair in Women's Studies from 2008 to 2009. Professor Cooper currently teaches in the Department of History and the Department of Sociology and Social Anthropology at Dalhousie University. Her research on slavery, abolition, Black education, women's studies, and youth studies has made her a leading figure in the field of African Canadian studies. She is an academic leader who founded the Black Canadian Studies Association and the Dalhousie Black Faculty and Staff Caucus. And one piece of exciting news, she is the newest recipient of Dalhousie University's President's Award for the advancement of equity, diversity, and inclusiveness. Now, she is also a novelist and a renowned poet and spoken word artist. She's published over 6 books of poetry and was recently honored as the Poet Laureate of Halifax from 2018 to 2020. She is truly someone whose research and creative work always bridge the gap between academia and the world at large. So please join me in extending a very warm welcome to Professor Afua Cooper.
Thank you, Helen, for such a warm and wonderful introduction. It's my great pleasure to be here. I also want to thank President Johnson for sponsoring this Dream Colloquium, and I'm so happy to be a part of it. I have very fond memories of my time at SFU when I was the Ruth Wynn Woodward Chair in Women's Studies at the campus. And also the BCSA, the Black Canadian Studies Association, was founded at Simon Fraser University. It was one of my community initiatives that I engaged in while at SFU. So it's my great pleasure to be here. I want to thank Rob and Seth and all the people who are working behind the scenes to make this happen. And a big thank you to Elder Margaret for the prize. It's really, really beautiful. I think it's like food for the soul before we start, you know, an event or an initiative that we get the blessings of the world, the blessings of spirit, the blessings of God. So thank you all. I'm gonna begin with a poem called Fugitive. It's on the list. It's one of the poems on the list that I sent to Seth. And the subtitle is Elizabeth Russell Speaks of Her Slave, Peggy Pompadour. The scene is Toronto. It's about maybe 1804. Elizabeth Russell is the sister of the former administrator of the province, Peter Russell, and she keeps a diary. And in the diary, she talks about family of enslaved people. She have a woman and her children. The woman's name is Peggy, and Peggy keeps running away and thinking that she's free and taking her children with her. It speaks to, you know, a very little known period of our history of this nation we call Canada, in which Black people were enslaved. Peggy is in the habit of running away. It would be bad enough if she left by herself, but now she's taking her children with her. She's a very bad woman, a mean slave. She goes to the outskirts of the city and roams the bushes, eating berries and wading in the Don River, catching trout that still travel to these parts. She has erected a hut of sorts from the brambles of the elderberry tree. She lived there with her daughters, Amy and Millie, for 3 weeks until Peter sent the constable to retrieve her. He returned the children to the house, but lodged Peggy in jail. Now he wants to sell her, but neither Joseph Brandt nor Matthew Elliott want to buy her on account of her fugitive career, though they had promised Peter they would. Because no one wants to buy her, Peter has to keep her in jail. He resents paying the jailer's fee. If only this mean slave would behave. Peggy's so-called husband, Pumpy, visits her each day, bringing her food, a blanket, and ginger tea. He tells me that even though it's summer, it is still cold in jail. Once Pumpy even snatched the children from the house to visit her. Pumpy is a free man, otherwise we would jail him too. Peggy's incorrigible son, Jupiter, has followed in her fugitive steps. He has just run off. Someone saw him in the vicinity of the Don around Patra Road, lurking about Mr. Long's farm. Peter has sent the constables after him. Peter really wishes to be rid of Peggy. I, for one, do not ever want her in this house again. I hate the very sight of her. After she smashed the fine china I crossed the sea with from Ireland. Because the jailer's fee is mounting, Peter is forced to put an ad in the newspaper. Matthew Elliott has disappointed us. Joseph Brandt, the same. Perhaps someone will take pity on Peter and take the wretch and her son off his hand. I, for one, have already gifted her two daughters, Amy and Millie, to my goddaughter, Elizabeth Dennison. And I'll read a part of the ad. It's Peter did put an ad in the newspaper in York, February 10th, 1806, to be sold, a Black woman named Peggy, aged about 40 years old, and a Black boy, her son, named Jupiter, aged about 15 years old, both of them the property of the subscriber. Um, really don't know what happened to Peggy, but we do know that, as Elizabeth wrote in her diary, she did take Peggy's daughters and gave them as gifts to her goddaughter, Elizabeth Dennison. Now, the Dennisons was one of the family compact families. They were part of that family compact circle in colonial Upper Canada. I'm reading from the book called Black Matters. It was recently published, November 2020, and it's a collaboration between myself and Wilfred Rossert, who is a literary scholar and a photographer from the University of Bielefeld in Germany. And so Willie provided the images, the photographs, the paintings, the graffiti of and about people from all over the African diaspora within Canada, Europe, South America, Central America, the United States. The next poem I'm going to read, I thought I must read a Vancouver poem. And the one that's in the book is called Bad Boy Jimmy, which is a tribute to Jimi Hendrix, the legendary musician and guitarist. He spent some time when he was a kid with his grandmother, Nora Hendrix, who lived in what is Hogan's Alley, or what was Hogan's Alley. I think it is still Hogan's Alley. But Jimmy lived with his grandmother there during the summer when he would come up from Seattle to visit her and actually spend time in a primary school there. So I'm a big fan of Jimmy, and I wrote this poem, which is nicely coupled with one of Willie's photographs. Bad boy Jimmy, are you a Fimi? Me is your Black Madonna, the one named Ava Maria. I'm gonna say that in English. Bad boy Jimmy, you are mine. I am your Black Madonna, the one named Ava Maria. Bad boy Jimmy, come and get it. Love along the watchtower, guitar caress your purple flower. Bad boy Jimmy, it's your girl from Hogan's Alley, the love of your life, the island wife. Bad boy Jimmy, Ross and Nora betrothed us as baby. Seahorn across the Georgia Strait announced you as my eternal mate. Choctaw fighter, Assagai thrower, merman, Black Panther. I'll continue. The next one is called Queen of Cool, and it's inspired by a photograph from Lisbon, Portugal, with two Black women who I thought just looked really, really cool, super cool. You too cool, Rift Valley sister, ruler of all the lands of the Nile, empress of Kush, double Aphrodite, Lisbon worships at your feet. This next one is called Seafar Woman. And it's a picture inspired by a woman holding a camera, and she's about to take a photograph. And cameras have their own eyes. And so I'm thinking this woman is seen far in Jamaica, where I'm from. We talk about people having four eyes. because when we say the person have four eyes, it means they can see in the spirit world and in other dimensions. So I'm using the idea in this poem. Olorun is the name of the god in Yoruba language, Olorun, and it's, you can say he or she for Olorun, it doesn't matter, but Olorun was the creator of the universe. When Olorun created the earth, she pulled the poles apart, separated the east from the west, blessed humans with four eyes, gifting them with the ability to look and see in every direction. Next one called A World Greener Than Eden. And I wrote it in honor of my father and my grandfathers and my uncles who um, planted food. And, maybe during the COVID epidemic, when we just started, food was uppermost in my mind and in other people's minds. We joined long lines at the supermarkets. They talked about the province gonna run out of food. There's no food security. So I thought of my father, who by training, his day job was that of a mechanic, but he wanted to be an agronomist when he was growing up, but he got married and had a bunch of kids, so he became a mechanic, but still worked the soil. My father planted a provision ground with yams of all sorts, yellow, white, Negro, Afu, Lucy, even Yampi, and sweet potatoes with red skin, golden skin, white skin, and pumpkin, squash, dasheen, badus, cocoa, cassava, cucumber, and other root and vine crops, gungo peas, okras, plantains, and bananas. He planted breadfruit and ackee trees, and like the agronomist he was, crafted a tree that bore June plum, avocado, and jackfruit at the same time. For short term, Dad planted a callaloo patch with pak chow, spinach, bell peppers, bird peppers, scotch bonnet, carrot, garlic, onions, scallions. My father always praised the soil. Decades before, my grandfather planted citrus groves with sweet orange, civil orange, tangerine, lime, the startling lemon, and grapefruit trees that every season bore so much that neighbors, friends, and passers-by invited themselves into our yard to partake. Grandfather also planted coconut trees, made his own oil and milk from the coconut flesh, grew sugarcane, had his own mill that pressed the juice from the cane, made wet sugar and molasses, tended a cocoa walk from which he prepared chocolate to make cocoa tea for us, which he sweetened with wet sugar and flavored with coconut milk, nutmeg, and cinnamon powder for us. Grandfather also planted corn. These men built a well with a spout pointing in each of the four directions that carried water to irrigate the crops they planted. The end. And this poem is called Congo Songs by the Rivers of Babylon, Part 2, inspired by my journey to Lisbon. And the picture is also from Lisbon. I'm singing about the Congo because you go across Europe and you see Black people singing their songs of woe and their songs of tribulation as they fight against the terrible oppression that's meted out to them in some of these European cities. So it's inspired by this musician in Lisbon. We gonna sing Congo songs in a Babylon this morning, Congo songs. And they won't be songs of grief and exile. They won't be songs of pain and sorrow, Congo songs. Congo songs in a Babylon this morning, Congo songs. They won't be songs of trouble and trial. They won't be songs of heartbreak and misery, but songs of joy and laughter, Congo songs. Songs of strength and sunshine, Congo songs. Songs of children born, songs of mothers birthing, songs of grandmothers living, and of our fathers breathing, Congo songs. No more songs of agony and anguish. No more songs of woe and calamity. We gonna sing Congo songs, songs of brothers striding, songs of sisters striving, songs of grandfathers dancing. We gonna sing Congo songs in a Babylon this morning, Congo songs. No more songs of children dying, but of the sun arising, Congo songs, songs of the certainty of us living, songs of the certainty of us living, songs of mothers birthing, songs of children singing. We gonna sing Congo songs in a Babylon this morning, Congo songs, Congo songs. And this last poem is called Rara. Um, it's a tribute to Haiti. It's a tribute to Black culture everywhere. It's a tribute to Carnival. Here in this poem, temporal periods all merge into one, past, present, and future collide, and we journey through different geographic spaces. It was inspired by the Carnival in Martinique, and there were all these Rara bands. Rara bands came out of Rara culture from Haiti, as I said, and from Africa before that, Dahomey or the Republic of Benin, and then seeing all these songs, all this music, all these artists walking around Fort de France, dancing in Fort de France, inspired this poem. And of course, my imagination took flight. All kind of people started to appear to me. What is this I hear? 1,000 drums playing, rat-a-tat, 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 tat, tat, and Max Roach conducting, rat-a-tam, 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 tam, tam, trap drums, djembes, and congos, and the voices of 100 archangels chanting into the wind. Ra, 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 ra. Drums scream the name of Dahomey. But this is Fort de France. Dahomey is on the other side of the ocean. What is this I hear? Rara drums awaken in the city. A dog howls. I look through the window. He dives into the sea and disappears while swimming to the other side of the harbor. A cock, its circadian clock recalibrated, crows at 15 minutes to midday. Rara rhythms have remade the world. But this is not Haiti. How come these Rara people are marching all over Fort de France, sending vibrations into the earth, the air, the sky, answering secret rhythms with sacred rhythms? I am sure they are not mortal beings, but a celestial horde on the march with Babatunde Olatunji. The sons of trap drums, Sasaye, up to the hills, to Didier, to Trenel, even up to the Balata Road, to the volcano named Montpellier. And from the peak of the hill, the drummers and trumpeters look down onto the harbor, look way past the horizon, and beat their thoughts onto the air, sending back the colonizer and Indian killer Desnambuc to the deepest dungeon of France, recrowning Châteauguay, beating the martial rhythms for triumphant Kalinago, for triumphant Carib warriors, reversing the slave trade, stitching whole again Africa, And in the distance, from the direction of Lamentin, I hear the pounding of hooves. Doom, 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 doom. The earth trembles in unexpected bliss. I see clouds of brown dust spiraling into the sky. I feel the hot breath of panting steeds rushing toward the city. Somewhere there is a clash of cymbals. A gate opens. Mounted men holding a landscape of Osafo flags rush through. Sparks of fire rise from the horses' hoofs. What is this? The cavalry, led by the fugitive named Mathieu Leveillé? From the savannah, the drummers advance, beating on 1,000 drums, beating on horns and trumpets, bamboo sticks, maracas, shak, 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 not made by human hands. African captives chained at the bottom of slave ship, drowned in the shipwreck at Anskafar, and from the volcano at Montpellier. Oh, I can hear them weeping, wailing, gnashing their teeth, a fury of chains clanking as the ship crashed on the rocks and sank to the bottom of the sea. Somber ghosts stand on the beach, look across the ocean. Take us back to Benin, take us back to Benin. Now they walk across the landscape at Diamond Rock, beating their chest and chanting a saltwater dirge. Rah-rah from Dahomey, rah-rah from Haiti, rah-rah in Fort-de-France, rah-rah blowing onto the Caribbean Sea towards St. Lucie and La Dominique, way up to Les Îles des Vierges and down to the tip of Venezuela, creating this archipelago of rhythms. And then a boy, 14 years old, pierces the air with the fury from his trumpet, and suddenly the cacique, Bohichio, stirs from his sleep, rubs his eyes, grabs his conch shell, and blows a message to Hatui over there in Cuba, and to Louverture, Desaline, Christophe, Cécile Fatima, and Huracan, the god of thunder, blows his breath across the sea. Hurricane a come, ono betaron, hurricane a come. Meanwhile, Empress Anacaona, Queen of Hispaniola, stands on the tallest peak of Haiti, and whirlwinds, she begins to whirlwind a final dance for independence. Rah, 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 to rah. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Cooper.
Hi.
I'm a student in the Colloquium, and I have some predetermined questions for you, two from the class. And after that, we'll go into other Q&A questions. So the first is, a theme of your work is unearthing untold histories and stories of Black diaspora globally. What do you feel is the impact of this unearthing?
I think the impact is that people are, if it's even one person, but at least some people are coming in knowledge, coming into the knowledge of this, getting great awareness and consciousness about this. I'm always surprised, but pleasantly surprised when someone sends me a note and said, you know, I learned this because of you. I got an email from a woman who is now a professor actually at Rice University. She said, because of your book, The Hanging of Angelique, I did a PhD. I was so moved. I felt I'm going to pursue this scholarship. Her work is in women and incarceration, but she sent me that email yesterday. So that's, you know, part of the impact of my work. I set out initially as a kid, as a young person, And as I came into greater conscious of myself, thinking that this will be my contribution as a human being who goes through this journey on the planet to bring myself first and other people into greater awareness of these stories. These are counter narratives, these are our stories, to put for a while, hopefully permanently, these narratives at the center of the discourse. We can all occupy the center at the same time.
Perfect, perfect, thank you. The second question I have for you is, how do creative imagination and historical events affect you and the way that you create and shape your work? In other words, how do you make connections between history and the need to reimagine elements of history?
Yes, thank you for that question. And I think this poem I just read, Rara, speaks to that. Because, you know, I was in Martinique, in the island of it's an island in the Caribbean, between, you know, St. Lucia and Dominica. And I arrived on the island at carnival time. It was the first day of carnival. I didn't go for a carnival. I went to do a French course. And my host said to me, it's carnival day, let's put down your suitcase and let's go to carnival. I'm like, whoa. And so for an entire week, the island was in carnival mode. And so there are all these Rara bands, right? They have Rara bands from Haiti, they have local Martinican Rara bands. Rara bands came down from New York, from Panama, from Miami. And so here is Martinique, which is still a colony of France. The French have reconceptualized Martinique's relationship. They say it's no longer a colony, it's a part of France, Outre-mer, France overseas, which is double speak. It's kind of crazy, but we leave it for now. But so it's a colony of France, which meant that it was a sugar colony. This is how the French made their money in the 18th century. They sucked Martinique dry. They brought enslaved people from Africa to produce sugar and you know, other tropical items, and they got rich. They got stupendously wealthy. But before this colonial invasion, there were the indigenous people on Martinique. They were called the Kalinagos or the Carib people, and they engaged in all these wars with the French for their islands, for St. Lucia, for Dominica, for St. Kitts. And I mentioned the name of one man. His name is Desnambuk. He was known as the Indian killer. You know, terrible, terrible genocider. And so you have these histories colliding, the colonial history, the African slave trade, and the African people themselves staying alive through their music and their culture. And I ended with Queen Anacaona. Anacaona was the queen of Hispaniola, the island of what comprises today of Haiti and Dominican Republic. And she was the queen on the island, very powerful woman. She met Christopher Columbus, or he met her, and she engaged in war against Christopher Columbus. The Spaniards eventually hanged her, and 80 caciques, 80 chiefs from the island. But I end the poem with her because I'm saying the region of the Caribbean, of the Americas, is still not free. Anacaona is standing on the tallest point of Hispaniola, and she's dancing. She's dancing a warrior dance. She's dancing the dance of independence. So, you know, for me, Anacaona is not this woman who's hanged by Christopher Columbus. She's this warrior queen, still dancing on the top of the tallest mountain, because independence is still yet to come.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much for that. I've got questions from the Q&A coming in for you. And I'm going to start with the first one here, which is being provided for me. What inspires you to continually write, and with the note that your work is very powerful?
Thank you. I think what inspires me to write is my love for life, my love for words, my love for history. I feel I feel now more and more closer to my ancestors. Both my parents have become ancestors now. They have passed away, and before them, there was a generation of the grandparents and the grandparents' siblings who looked after us when we were growing up. And I was born and raised in Jamaica, and they told us stories. Actually, not folk tales. My grandparents, they were more interested in politics. So they told us stories about, they were born and raised in the colonial period when, Jamaicans were fighting the British and the riots and the rebellions and all of that. Those were what they told us. I was born in a sugar parish, Jamaica, like Martinique, who was created for the sake of making Europe rich. And where I was born, sugarcane cultivation. So growing up in that oral culture where people spoke stories, where people tell these narratives of struggle and resistance really inspired me as a child. And hearing stories of my own personal family members, like a grandfather who left Jamaica and who went to Cuba to find work, and then came back, was able to come back and bought land, and then was able to marry the woman who became my grandmother. And it's these are just fascinating. Imagine a 19-year-old kid jumping on a ship, going off to Cuba to work, to make a better life for himself and his family. So I'm inspired by that. I am always delving into the histories, the future, the present of Black people all around the world. Because as I said, with the image of Anaconda, they're dancing, liberation is still not yet here.
Great. Okay. Bear with me here. We've got 2 more questions.
No problem.
So the next one is, what does it mean to teach through a decolonial lens in academia?
Simply put, decentering certain stories, decentering the Eurocentric stories that we've been fed for the past 300-400 years, putting other narratives at the center. That's what it means for me. Thinking, not just think, we're living in a really great moment right now because so much work has been done by BIPOC scholars and artists in the past 50 years, right? It's 50 years of women's studies at SFU. The past 50 years, so much has happened. There has been critical interventions, curricular interventions, especially in academia. So the work is there. People are producing the work. So it's bringing this work to ourselves, to our students, so we can critically engage these productions. I'm not saying we shouldn't learn about Europe and the Eurocentric canon. Of course we should, but we've been learning about it for the past 400 years. Now it's time to hear other stories. It's time to birth other stories. It's time to let other tongues speak. It's time to give voice to the histories and to the imagination and different conceptualizations of life. We talk about President Johnson, Black futures. Yes, Black futures, Black present, the Black past, they're all important, and we mix them up. We have to develop this double vision or 4 eyes. Now we have to have 4 eyes or the third eye and look into other worlds and bring back what we have found into this physical world, into this material world, because lives depend on the people. People can be killed in a classroom. People can die in a classroom because of the literature, because of the work, because of the pedagogy. But people can also be reborn. People can take flight in a classroom. And that's what I want, for people to be reborn, for people to take flight, to people to be liberated, to see themselves that this learning, this knowledge is liberatory, and this knowledge can free the world, and this knowledge can transform society. That's my goal. That's my objective.
Perfect. That segues very nicely into the last question, actually. So I'm wondering about the reference to 4 directions in A World Greener Than Eden. Is there any ontological meaning and or connection to the First Nation medicine wheel, also oriented in 4 directions?
I'm sure there is. Thank you for the question. I wrote it. There's so many similarities in world cultures, in different world cultures, in many of the African cultures, in the Zulu culture, the Akan culture in Ghana. The 4 directions are so important when a child is initiated into, manhood or womanhood or whatever initiation. They're made to face the 4 directions, and so the 4 directions feature a lot. I was thinking of that, of the African culture and also the African Jamaican culture. And it's also, there's a biblical reference there, biblical Quranic reference, in Eden, apparently there were 4 directions too, before Adam and Eve got cast out of the garden. So I'm just playing with that, talking about the imagination, what the 4 direction means, and the whole idea of having 4 eyes, which is in the other poem about seafarer woman. As I said earlier, when we were growing up in Jamaica, still to this day, people always talk about 4 eyes. She or he or they have 4 eyes, right? You see that woman, she has 4 eyes, right? She can see into the spiritual realm. So I'm playing with all those ideas, with all those the stories that we heard. And if you, and this is where, the past and the present and the future become one. Because if you can see in the future, you can also see in the past, you live in the present. So yes, it's certainly there are these similarities in indigenous North American cultures to the idea of the 4 directions. But I think of, my father becomes in the poem a kind of sayer, a kind of wise person, a nurturing person who walks about the world and who plants food and who feeds the world. Oftentimes we give these nurturing capacities to women, but men also have these nurturing capacities. These are human capacities to feed and to nurture. And so I was playing with all those ideas too.
Perfect, thank you. It looks like we can wrap up the Q&A here, but there's also opportunity for a couple of more questions, is that right? So here's an additional question. We've got some extra time, so okay. More for you. So do African studies programs, minors and majors, offer a way for a rebirth in the classroom? How would this direction change learning, especially in Western Canada, where the presence of Black Canadian people is not as pronounced as in Eastern Canada?
Could you say that again?
Yes, sorry. Do African studies programs, minors and majors, offer a way for a rebirth in the classroom? How would this direction change learning, especially in Western Canada, where the presence of Black Canadian people is not as pronounced as in Eastern Canada?
Okay, got you, thank you. It is a process. The oldest communities are, Black communities are in Eastern Canada and Central Canada. And the oldest and the largest. So that's part of the reason, I think, why you have these initiatives with respect to Black studies happening in Central Canada and in Eastern Canada. And they're great, but at the same time, it's some of these initiatives like just started this year or last year. It wasn't as if, they have been happening for a long time. It has been a tremendous struggle, and I'm going to get to Western Canada. There was a book called The Little Black Sambo, really an awful little book that was the staple in primary schools across Canada, in in British Columbia, right back to Nova Scotia and perhaps Newfoundland. And, you know, Black children had to endure the reading of that book every day in classrooms. And in 1957, Black school supporters and parents in Ontario started this protest to ban, it's called the banning of the book, The Little Black Sambo. That's 1957. That's over 60 years ago. And so I'm thinking it's been such a long struggle, and it's even before 1967, right? But if we look at the banning of the book, The Little Black Sambo, as a kind of watershed moment, and then after that, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you look at many Black communities across Canada, starting Saturday schools, Sunday schools, other weekend schools to teach children, to teach their children their history and heritage, to make them feel proud, to make them feel that they belong, to make them feel that, to raise their self-esteem. So it's not as if in the East or in Central Canada, there's a whole bunch of things that, you know, is going on in the universities. It's the Black community itself in these places that took the initiative over the past 100 years to ensure that these things could happen. And now you have schools like mine launching a Black Studies major and a minor and then a major and hopefully a Bachelor's of Arts degree program. In Western Canada, the community is much smaller. And that's, that's because of immigration policies. For 100 years, from 1867 to 1962, Black people were like banned from entering Canada. There was a ban on Black migration. And so the smallness of the community is something that was really created artificially. So I think it's left up to individuals, left up to communities, it's left up to students to agitate, because nothing that has been given to the Black community, wherever that community is in Canada, was given freely, was given without a struggle. We're hoping that something should be given without a struggle, because Black people are human beings too, and like basic human and civil rights should be given without a struggle. But as Paul Robeson, the great singer and civil rights advocate, said, there's no progress without struggle. And that seems to be the motto right now. I mean, if you recall, George Floyd had to die before some institutions issued these statements of solidarity. And I'm thinking it takes someone to be publicly executed before you finally realize that Black people are human beings and deserve civil and human rights. So it's in the West, it's something that people there have to do, and which I know they are doing.
Great. We have two more questions for you, and I think you may have answered this one already, but I'll ask it again, and hopefully you can elaborate. Is the Black Studies program where you teach available as a major or just a minor?
It's a minor right now, and we are, as we speak, transforming it into a major. We hope by September 2022 to have it as a major. So it's something we've been working on for the past 18 months, but it has to go through all these, the different levels of the Senate and so on. But fingers crossed, it will be launched for September 2022.
Fantastic. And so a last question, which is a view from the Q&A. So I was deeply inspired by your book on Mary Angelique. Could you tell us more about your future history projects?
Well, my future history project, thank you for the question, is I'm actually writing another book. I'm on enslaved women. I'm working on 4 enslaved women this time. In the English period in British North America. One was a teenager. She was 15 years old. She died in childbirth. Her name was Diana Bastien. I'm looking at the same Peggy Pompadour that I read a poem about, Fugitive. So I'm looking at women and women's bodies and colonial violence from Nova Scotia to Ontario. So I think tentatively the book is called For Women. There'll be a subtitle, but that's what I'm doing now. And yeah.
Great. I think we're all very happy for that. So I'll end the Q&A here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for moderating the questions, Thomas.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Afua, so much. I wish I could interpret the chat for you, because during your reading and after your reading, it was just an outburst of rapture basically, and just there's so much love and passion. So thank you so much for giving us all that like power and inspiration, and also for answering all our pesky questions. I want you to know that the students in the colloquium really study your work, and they were really involved in organizing this as well. And it was great for students to actually also have a chance to moderate. So thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
And I want to thank everybody for participating, for coming out today. It's really great to see everybody virtually. Before you all leave, I want to make sure you stay for 2 announcements. The first is that we have 3 more public events in this series, and I invite all of you to join us. The next one is happening in 2 weeks. It's a conversation with Trans Studies scholar Susan Stryker, so I hope to see a lot of you there. And secondly, we do have 2 prizes that are generously donated from the alumni office, and I want to announce the name of the 2 winners. The first prize is a $150 token for SFU bookstore, and the winner is Susie Fodor. I will type the name here. And the second prize is a $50 token. It's either I think it's either a DoorDash token or a swag bag. So, and the prize winner is Joan Whitman Hoff. You will both be notified by the alumni office to claim your prize. So thank you so much for staying and joining us. I want to thank Afua again, and I really hope we'll have a chance to invite you back in person. But you know, given the constraints, it was wonderful to be with you and spend this time with you this afternoon.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm super, super appreciative. It was just a pleasure to do this, always. Thanks to all the members of the audience, too.
Thank you, everyone. And the chat is still coming in.
Yeah. Bye-bye.